Hello fellow gamers, welcome to Azreality Gaming. My name is Dustin, and today we're going to be asking the question, is Final Fantasy XIII worth it in 2021 and or future years? And to do that, let's jump into a review. Final Fantasy XIII is set in a more future sci-fi fantasy style world instead of the usual epic fantasy of previous Final Fantasies. There are still elements of fantasy style genre here, but it's still mostly rooted in science fiction. To keep the storyline as spoiler-free as I can, I'll just sum it up by saying it's an epic struggle between two forces for the right to exist and be part of a greater system than themselves. There's a light touch on character development, but some characters really push the boundaries on mental issues, which can make this game a little bit more serious. The game brings insensitive elements such as a child's death and suicide, which was a risky move by the creators, but ended up working out well and draws you into the character's journey and their struggles. The story is really hard to follow in the beginning with so many new terms and names being thrown out like l'Cie, IC, Pulse, Grand Pulse, etc. They could have done a better job making those words not so damn confusing. But once you start getting the hang of the terms, you will soon start to realize there's a whole nother level of background story written out in the data logs. While it's annoying to need to read these little data logs in order to get the whole background, think of it like a movie that is created based upon a book. The book always writes out all the details and explains things much more than in the movies, because the movies have to show you with actions, backgrounds, costumes, sounds, and emotions. So if you want the full story, which is quite great by the way, you'll need to take some time to read these logs. Let's talk about the characters. Vanille is the cutie kind of fun character, plays the innocent role, but honestly is a walking talking orgasm. Hope is just a little bitch who whines more than Luke Skywalker, not being able to go to the Dachi station to pick up more power converters. Snow is always trying to be the hero and acts all tough. Lightning just wants everyone to fuck off and let her do her job. And Saz actually has deep emotional issues that he's dealing with. Fang joins so late she is relatively unknown and doesn't do a lot of character development, unfortunately. There are of course a few other supporting characters, but they are not playable. Putting all the negative parts aside, all the characters have an amazing intertwining plot that plays off of each other. There are a lot of great bonding moments, and even some emotional vulnerability at times dealing with loss. Even though some of the characters are a bit over the top, their background and plot does keep you engaged and wondering what will happen next. Will Hope's balls finally drop and just toughen up? Even though I hate Hope so much and I nag on him all the time, he is one of the best healers you can play in the group, so better get used to him if you want to have the best team composition. Next, let's talk about gameplay. This is the last true turn-based Final Fantasy. So if you're a fan of that combat style and getting sick of the real-time action from Final Fantasy XV and Final Fantasy VII Remake, then you'll feel right at home. While I do enjoy the real-time action of the newer games, I do much prefer the strategy and thought behind turn-based combat. It just feels more like a Final Fantasy to me. Paradigm shifts is a new mechanic that was introduced in Final Fantasy XIII and really takes a bit to get used to. You'll be swapping back and forth many times during the simplest battles, and there are a lot of strategy around this. Swap too soon, and you'll miss out on a spell finishing up or an attack landing. Swap too late, and the characters might lose a buff or die from not getting healed in time. It really keeps you actively participating in the combat, even though it's still turn-based. Stagger is another new mechanic added in Final Fantasy XIII, and of course later used again in Final Fantasy VII Remake. Think of it like a shield that, once it's depleted, all damage against the monster is increased, and the monster doesn't usually attack back during that limited time window. There are a lot of strategies onto abusing this mechanic, but they all come down to leveraging the right paradigm shifts at the right moment. Encounters are not random, and instead monsters appear on the screen, and if you can sneak behind them without alerting them, you'll get a chance to sneak attack, which greatly increases your chance you'll stagger them on the first hit. There's a lot of value in trying to do this for certain fights later in the game. Summons are a bit odd and really are kind of wonky in this game. They don't do a ton of damage like you'd expect, but the cutscenes are really great and worth watching and actually worth earning all the different summons. Yes, the game is on rails and doesn't allow for exploring until much later in the game. This has been one of the main issues against this game and honestly gets repeated every other Final Fantasy release anyways. Just look at Final Fantasy VII Remake. That's on rails. But Final Fantasy XV went way too far in the open world, so much so that they couldn't fill it with enough content. So be careful what you wish for. Sure, I'd love to have a perfect blend of both, but let's be honest, I've not seen many games that do this successfully anymore. The graphics have really held up over the years, and honestly could easily sit side by side with some of the newer generation formats. The PC version has gotten some improvements in this area as well, so if you're interested in pushing the graphics up a bit more, check it out on Steam. You can now play it in 1080p. At the launch of the game on Steam, unfortunately, there were all kinds of frame rate issues, but a patch has been released and those are all fixed now. Let's talk about the music. I'm not normally a big fan of most RPG music, and get my enjoyment from just increasing character development. But in this instance, Final Fantasy XIII is one of the only Final Fantasies I've actually given a shit about for the music. Not only do I just enjoy it, but I cherish it, and it really helps to set the mood in all aspects of the game. The musical score is genius, and one of the highest marks for this game. There are whole YouTube channels dedicated just to the music that shows how good it is. I can't give this high enough praise, and if you are like me and never really pay attention to music, then this might be one you want to take a look at. Lastly, it's been trendy these days to do remaster of a lot of games. I would like to think Final Fantasy XIII series is up for this next special treatment. It also needs to be added to the digital subscription services for the Xbox and PlayStation, especially on the PlayStation Network, since you can't play these PS3 games on PS4 or PS5. To summarize, Final Fantasy XIII in its original release did have a bunch of issues and wasn't well received. We know this. But fast forwarding several years and a couple other games in there that really weren't that good anyways, I think it's a win. I think you guys should give it a try. I really enjoy it. I've been able to replay it a couple different times, and I'm now actually playing Final Fantasy XIII Part 2, so maybe there'll be a review for that in the future. But hey, in the comments below, let me know if you too love this game, or if you hate it, or you had a different experience than I did, you liked the music, you didn't like the music as much. And, follow me on my social media, give it a thumbs up, do the subscribing thing, you know what to do. And until then, we'll see you guys next time.